his leadership style. Was the executive order consistent with ways in which the executive orders are used in general? In terms of these questions, these precedents are almost complete opposites. Both orders have precedent in their actions. However, Truman's precedent wasn't quite as clear. He created it himself. He had received a series of calls for greater civil rights, and therefore he made broader moves towards integration. Eisenhower, however, waited 3 years after Brown versus the Board of Education before taking a strong stance to stand up for the court's decision. In terms of public opinion, neither order received overwhelming support. However, the integration of Central High School was perceived in a better light around the country than was that of the armed forces. This is only true, however, when looking at the whole country. The South, where desegregation had its largest effect, perceived Eisenhower's order in an extremely negative light. It took between 3 and 5 years before the Army was fully integrated. It only took 1 day for Little Rock, Arkansas, or for Little Rock 9 to be protected by the National Guard at their desegregated public high school. However, integration of schools did not peak until 1988, 31 years after that order was given, and has been declining ever since. These orders were consistent with both presidents' leadership styles. However, they were more consistent with Truman's. Finally, from what scholars understand about reasons for executive orders, Eisenhower's order and the ways in which he issued orders in general were more consistent with the reasons researchers suggest orders are given. There are many differences between these two presidents and orders. However, the results are similar. Both orders have led to a result that has continued a system of disproportionality. We are seeing an overrepresentation of Black Americans in both the armed forces and public schools. As opposed to having similar percentages of Black Americans in the Army as there are in the country, the percentage in the Army is significantly higher. In recent history, this has been due to the over-recruitment of Black Americans. Furthermore, these recruitment profiling techniques have been in effect. Furthermore, while these techniques have been in effect, white Americans, especially those with greater amounts of wealth, are entering the armed forces at record low rates. The percentages of Black Americans in the armed forces are dropping, but there is now a problem of no one to fill these spots, and the armed forces are moving closer to not meeting their goals. Furthermore, there remains an unequal number of Black and white students in public schools across the nation. The end of busing has led us to a time in which schools are based on neighborhoods, which tend to create segregation as neighborhoods are also based on race. There are many possible reasons for this divide. It could be that recent presidents have not paid enough attention to the issues and allowed them to slip into remission. It could also be that issues surrounding race are better handled by another body within the government, or not appropriate for the government to handle. There are many other reasons for which neither of these orders were fully effective in the way they were intended to be. It's possible that critical race theorists or other fields of study would be helpful in determining what issues surrounding these arguments are. It is my conclusion that neither Truman nor Eisenhower were effective in improving the lives of Black Americans. And while they may or may not have cared a great deal about Black Americans and their equality, neither was particularly influential with these orders to better be able to improve long-term equality in this country. This leads me to a question that I will examine probably for the rest of my life. What I want to know is, does anyone care about Black Americans? Does it bother white Americans that it has been reported that schools are now more segregated than they were in 1954? Does it bother white Americans that in many places Black males are statistically more likely to end up in jail than college? Does it bother white Americans that the armed forces recruiters are specifically targeting Black Americans to fight and potentially die for this country? Or as white middle-class citizens, would we rather not consider these issues? We are 50 years away from when 9 high school students entered Central High School, and nooses are still being hung in high schools in Jena, Louisiana. Hillary Clinton is running for president, and she is announcing hardworking Americans are white Americans. And instead of sending their own children to fight in Iraq, Congress members and employees of the Pentagon are desperately trying to find someone to fill the gap of Black males that have already fought and died or are unwilling to fight in the war. Census data have confirmed that African Americans made up a disproportionate share of Hurricane Katrina's victims. About 1 of every 3 people who lived in the areas hit hardest by the hurricane were African American. By contrast, 1 of every 8 people in the United States are African American. African Americans living in New Orleans were especially likely to be without a vehicle before the hurricane struck. More than 1 in 3 Black households in New Orleans, and nearly 3 in 5 poor black households in New Orleans lacked a vehicle. Among white, non-Hispanic households in New Orleans, only 15% lacked a vehicle. This is not just a problem with New Orleans or other areas struck by the terror of Hurricane Katrina. According to the statistics released by the Census Bureau in 2006, black Americans suffer disproportionately all over the nation. Blacks are nearly 3 times more likely to live in poverty than non-Hispanic white Americans, and twice as likely to be uninsured. Black Americans aren't poor because of genetics, nor are they lazy or unable to do the work white Americans are. No president has made an attempt to improve on this issue since Nixon. But that doesn't mean that we as citizens should stop. Whether or not you like Kanye's music or the way he responds to losing awards, he made an attempt to have a real conversation about race, and we shunned him and changed his words. Listen to what he says, and tell me if he's wrong. George Bush doesn't care about black people. Do you?
With the breach of 3 levees to protect New Orleans, the landscape of the city has changed dramatically, tragically, and perhaps irreversibly. There's now over 25 feet of water where there was once city streets and thriving neighborhoods.
I hate the way they portray us in the media. We see a black family that says they're looting. We see a white family that says they're looking for food. And you know, it's been 5 days because most of the people are black. And even for me to complain about I would be a hypocrite because I've tried to turn away from teaching TV because it's too hard to watch. I've even been shopping before even giving a donation. So now I'm calling my business manager right now to see what is the biggest amount I can give. And just to imagine if I was down there, and those are my people down there. Is there anybody out there that wants to do anything that we can help with the setup, the way America is set up to help the poor, the black people, the less well off as slow as possible. I mean, this is the Red Cross is doing everything they can. We already realize a lot of the people that could help are at war right now. Another way, and they've given them permission to go down and shoot us.
And some of them, in many ways, more profoundly devastating is the lasting damage to the survivors who have been killed